It has
I
to be
hid my
done.
belly from the
There is
king
no other
until he
way.
growled. "Why do you smell
Please
like
be
milk?"
careful.
The
I can't
stone
lose you
walls
too.
seemed cold even under the gentle glow, and the wind whispered secrets through the ivy that climbed their sides. Inside, the halls were quiet, though the faint echo of servants' footsteps occasionally broke the silence. Among them moved Ira, a young maid whose presence was barely more than a shadow in the grand palace. She held her hands close to her belly, carefully hiding the small curve that she feared would betray her secret. Ira's heart raced as she passed the torchlit corridors. Every sound, every movement felt dangerous. The court was full of eyes, watchful, calculating, and merciless. She had learned early that a mistake here could cost more than a lost favor. It could mean exile, ruin, or death. And the secret she carried made her even more vulnerable. Her belly, small but undeniable to anyone who looked too closely, was her burden, a mark of a life that was not yet safe. The story of her condition was one she could not share. To speak it aloud was to invite suspicion, to draw attention, and in Eldoria attention was a dangerous gift. So she hid. She wrapped herself in loose gowns, avoided the main halls when the king walked past, and learned to speak softly, so that no one would notice the tremor in her voice. But some things could not be hidden. King Kale, ruler of Eldoria, was a man of presence. He moved through the court like a shadow that demanded attention. His eyes, dark as midnight pools, seemed to pierce through walls, through lies, and through the careful masks of courtiers. Rumors said he could sense fear and dishonesty from across a room. That perhaps was why Ira felt him everywhere, even when he was not there. Tonight, as she moved silently through the servants' quarters, she smelled him before she saw him. It was a faint, strange scent, a mixture of smoke from the torches and something more, something alive, commanding. She froze, her hands pressed instinctively to her belly. "Ira," a low voice called, and she knew it was him before she turned. Her heart skipped. There he stood at the edge of the corridor, his tall figure draped in dark velvet and silver embroidery. The moonlight caught the angles of his face, sharp and beautiful in a way that made her breath catch. His eyes were fixed on her, curious and unsettling, as if he were trying to read her very soul. "You are restless tonight," he said, stepping closer, his voice smooth but edged with something dangerous. I was just," Ira began, but her voice faltered. "You were hiding," he said, finishing her sentence for her. The faintest smile curved his lips, but it did not reach his eyes. "Always hiding. Why do you do that?" Ira's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to lie, to vanish into the shadows where he could not see her. But the truth hovered on her lips like a fragile bird, too delicate to release. I am careful," she said finally, keeping her voice low, almost a whisper. Kale stepped closer still. The light of the torches reflected off the silver embroidery of his cloak, and his presence filled the corridor so completely that Ira felt as if the walls themselves had shrunk around her. Then his eyes narrowed slightly and he leaned toward her, just enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "Why do you smell like milk?" he asked. The words were simple, almost casual, but they hit her like a storm. Her chest tightened, and she pressed her hands harder to her belly, wishing the floor would open and swallow her whole. She wanted to vanish, to be anywhere else but here, facing the king who had suddenly noticed what she had worked so hard to hide. She began, but the words died in her throat. What could she say? That she carried a child she could not even speak of, that her life had already been marked by secrets and danger. No lie would protect her now, and the truth was too powerful to release in this moment. Kale studied her, silent, waiting. His gaze was intense, as if he were trying to see the story she had hidden from the world. Ira felt exposed, like a delicate leaf trembling in the wind, but also strangely alive under his scrutiny. "I see," he said finally, his voice low and measured. "You carry something hidden, something no one must know." Ira's hands fell to her sides, trembling. She had never imagined that he would guess, that he would sense the secret she had guarded so fiercely. Yet here he was, standing before her, not with anger but with a strange, almost dangerous curiosity. I am careful," she repeated, this time with more conviction. "You are careful," he echoed, stepping back slightly, though his eyes never left her. "But the world is not careful. Secrets do not remain hidden forever." Ira's mind raced. How could she protect herself and her child in a palace where the king could see through walls and whispers alike? And yet, despite her fear, there was something compelling about him. Something that made her want to speak, to trust, to reach out, even when every instinct screamed against it. The king turned then, his cloak sweeping behind him like shadow. He moved through the corridor with the same quiet authority that made everyone else's movements seem clumsy in comparison. Ira followed at a distance, her heart still racing, unsure whether she was drawn by fear or by something deeper. In the courtyard, the moonlight reflected off the frozen fountain. Ira paused, her breath visible in the cold night air. Kale stopped beside her, silent for a moment, watching the water as if it held secrets of its own. "You hide too much," he said quietly. "There is power in hiding, yes, but there is also weakness, and sometimes hiding brings danger you cannot escape." Ira's hands were cold, but she felt the heat of his words deep in her chest. She wanted to speak, to tell him that she did not hide out of fear alone, but out of love for the child she carried. That child was her secret hope, her reason for enduring a world that seemed determined to break her. Yet the words remained lodged in her throat, too fragile, too precious to risk. The silence stretched, broken only by the faint rustle of the wind and the soft clinking of chains from the palace gates. Finally, Kale spoke again, and his voice carried an unusual weight, almost tender in its tone. "You are brave," he said. "Brave enough to carry a secret no one else could bear, but bravery alone does not protect you. You must learn to trust, or you will crumble under the weight of what you hide." Ira swallowed hard. Trust was a dangerous thing in Eldoria. She had trusted once long ago, and it had led to heartbreak she had not yet healed from. And yet, standing here beneath the silver light of the moon, she felt the stirrings of something she had thought impossible, the desire to let him in. Before she could answer, the distant sound of footsteps echoed through the courtyard. A servant, hurrying late with a message for the king, passed too close to the fountain. Ira froze, instinctively hiding behind the cold stone edge, her heart hammering. Kale's hand brushed against hers, light but grounding, and she felt an unexpected warmth spread through her chest. "Be careful," he murmured. "The night has eyes, and not all of them are kind." Ira nodded, though she did not need to. She had learned long ago how to move like a shadow, how to vanish when the light grew too harsh. But something in her, something fragile and hopeful, refused to disappear completely. As the footsteps faded, Kale finally turned to leave, his cloak flowing behind him like ink spilled across the marble. He paused, glancing over his shoulder. His eyes met hers once more, and for a fleeting moment the mask of kingly authority fell away, revealing something raw and unreadable. "Do not hide from me forever," he said, voice barely above a whisper. Then he was gone, swallowed by the shadows of the palace. Ira remained by the fountain, the cold stone pressing against her hands. Her heart was still racing, her mind spinning with thoughts she could barely grasp. He knew. He had seen through the careful veils she had constructed. And yet in his gaze she had glimpsed something she had not expected. Not judgment, not anger, but understanding, even if it was dangerous and tinged with desire. She pressed a hand to her belly, feeling the tiny life within her stir. The child, innocent and unaware of the dangers surrounding them both, seemed to pulse with the same quiet strength that had kept Ira moving through the palace unseen, untouched. And she realized with a sudden clarity that she could not hide forever. Not from the king, not from the court, not from the world that waited beyond the cold walls. But the question remained, could she trust him? The moon hung low, silver and serene, over the towers of Eldoria. And somewhere in the quiet halls of the palace, A king and a maid carried secrets that would shape the fate of both their lives. Secrets that were dangerous, fragile, and impossibly alive. Ira took a deep breath, steadying herself. The night was not yet over, and she knew in the deepest part of her heart that the world had already begun to change. The dawn rose slowly over Eldoria, painting the towers in pale gold. Ira woke in her small chamber, the soft sunlight touching her face like a gentle promise. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands resting on the curve of her belly, still small but impossible to ignore. The events of the night before haunted her thoughts. The king had noticed. He had smelled the truth she had tried to hide. Her chest tightened at the memory of his words, low and dangerous. "Why do you smell like milk?" No one in the palace knew about the life growing within her except her. And now, perhaps, the king did too. Fear and fascination intertwined within her, confusing her heart. She had learned long ago to separate feelings from danger. But how could she now, when danger had a face she could not forget, eyes that seemed to see through her soul? The morning passed in a blur of tasks. Ira moved from room to room, cleaning, arranging, serving. Yet her mind was elsewhere. Every time she passed the hall where the king walked, she felt his gaze lingering, though he was not there. The shadows of the palace seemed to follow her, whispering warnings she could barely hear. By midday, curiosity and perhaps a strange sense of courage drew her toward the West Garden, a place few servants visited. There the air was different, fresher, touched by magic she could feel in her bones. The fountain sparkled in the sunlight, and the roses, black, red, and frost-tipped, seemed almost alive. She knelt beside the fountain, letting her fingers touch the cold stone. The water reflected her face, pale and worried, but there was something in her reflection she had not noticed before: determination. "You come here often," a voice said behind her. Ira froze, her heart leaping. Kale stepped into the sunlight, tall and dark, his cloak brushing the ground. He did not look like a king here, not fully. He looked like a man who carried shadows as his closest companions. But even in shadow, there was a beauty she could not ignore. I like the garden," Ira said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It is quiet." "Quiet is dangerous in this palace," Kale replied, stepping closer. His eyes, dark and deep, scanned her face as if searching for hidden stories. "The court is full of whispers, and secrets rarely stay buried. You know this." Ira nodded, her hands pressing gently against her belly. She could feel the life within her stir, small and warm, reminding her why she must be careful. Yet here he was, close, studying her. She felt both exposed and strangely safe at the same time. "Tell me something," he said softly. "Do you fear me?" Her breath caught. Fear was her constant companion, but he was no ordinary danger. He was the king, the shadow that shaped every step in the palace, the voice that could end lives with a single word. And yet, she did not feel only fear. She felt something else, something dangerous and confusing, a pull toward him, a desire to be understood. "I do," she admitted finally, voice barely above a whisper. "But not in the way you think. I fear what might happen if I am discovered." Kale nodded slowly, his eyes unreadable. "And yet," he said, stepping closer, "you carry your secret boldly, even in the face of danger. That is courage." Ira lowered her gaze, unsure how to respond. The king's words were dangerous. They stirred emotions she was not ready to confront. And yet she could not stop herself from listening, from feeling the pull of his presence, strong and undeniable. Suddenly the wind shifted, carrying a faint, strange scent. Ira stiffened. She had learned to trust her senses in the palace. Danger often came first as a smell or a whisper. Kale followed her gaze, and his expression darkened. "They are coming," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Not all who watch the palace are loyal. Some see the moon mark and they seek its power." Ira's hands tightened around the edge of the fountain. Her heart pounded. The moon mark, the small, crescent-shaped mark hidden beneath her gown, was the source of whispers in the world beyond her. Legends spoke of its power, to curse, to protect, to transform. Yet it was dangerous, something the wrong person could use against her or against the child. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, fear and curiosity mingling. "Because you are tied to it," Kale said, "and because I cannot let harm come to you, not when you carry what others desire. You have strength you do not yet understand, and you must learn to use it before it is too late." Ira looked at him, her mind racing. She had lived all her life hiding, surviving quietly. The thought of stepping into power, even with his guidance, was terrifying. And yet something in his eyes, something beyond command, beyond fear, made her want to trust him. "Teach me," she said, almost against her will, her voice small but determined. "Help me understand." Kale's expression softened for the briefest moment. "Very well," he said. "But it will not be easy. There will be trials, dangers, and choices that will test every part of your heart. Are you willing?" Ira hesitated. The world beyond the garden was harsh, full of shadows she could barely imagine. And yet she knew the truth. She could not hide forever. She nodded. "Yes," she whispered. The day passed in a blur of movement and lessons. Kale led her to the palace library, a vast chamber filled with towering shelves of books, scrolls, and maps. Dust and candlelight mingled in the air, and the scent of old parchment made her head spin. "Knowledge is power," Kale said, his hand brushing hers briefly as he handed her a tome. "And power is what will protect you and the child." Ira opened the book carefully, her fingers trembling slightly. Words and symbols she had never seen before danced on the page. The text spoke of curses and blessings, of hidden magic that lay dormant in bloodlines, waiting for the right time to awaken. She read, fascinated, feeling the first stirrings of a new understanding. "The moonmark," Kale explained, standing close behind her, "is not a curse in itself. It is a key. But keys are dangerous. They can open doors to safety or to ruin." Ira swallowed, her mind spinning. She had always thought of herself as powerless, a simple maid hidden in the palace. Now she realized that she carried a strength that could change the world or destroy it. And Kale was there, standing behind her, guiding her, challenging her, making her heart beat faster than she had ever thought possible. Hours passed, and as evening fell, the palace grew quiet again. Shadows deepened, and the wind outside carried the first hints of winter. Ira and Kale walked through the gardens, silent except for the soft crunch of frost under their feet. "You are learning quickly," Kale said at last, his voice low, almost intimate. "But the true test will not come from books. It will come from the world outside these walls, from those who would use your secret against you." Ira looked up at him, her eyes wide. She felt the weight of his words, heavy and real. "I am ready," she said, though a part of her wondered if she truly was. Kale's gaze softened and he reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Perhaps," he said, "or perhaps you are only beginning to understand the power within you. Either way, you are not alone." The touch was brief, but it left a warmth in her chest that she could not explain. She felt both frightened and comforted, as if a storm and a sunrise had collided inside her. Suddenly, a rustle in the trees made them both turn. From the shadows stepped a figure cloaked in gray, the hood drawn low. The priestess, known for her knowledge of curses and her whispered influence in the court, emerged. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, locked onto Ira's, and a chill ran down the maid's spine. "You carry the moonmark," the priestess said, her voice cold, almost like ice, "and it calls to forces beyond your understanding. You cannot hide it forever." Ira's hands went to her belly instinctively. She felt the child move, small and alive, as if answering the priestess's words. Fear and defiance surged through her. She would not let this woman control her life. Kale stepped in front of her, his posture protective. "Back," he said, his voice a growl. "Do not approach her." The priestess smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. "The king cannot protect her from what is coming," she said. "The moonmark awakens tonight." Ira's heart pounded. The child stirred, the air seemed to shimmer, and a strange energy pulsed through the garden. She felt fear, yes, but also a sudden rush of strength. The lessons she had learned that day, The knowledge, the courage, the careful control swelled inside her. Kale reached out, taking her hand in his, steadying her. "Then we face it together," he said. Ira nodded, feeling a bond forming that went beyond fear or curiosity. It was trust, fragile and new, but real. She drew a deep breath, bracing herself for the unknown that waited. As the night deepened, the first stirrings of the moonmark's power awakened, shimmering faintly across her skin. The garden seemed alive, the shadows whispering secrets and warnings. Ira felt both the weight and the wonder of the gift she carried, and the danger that would follow. And in the quiet, Kale's gaze held hers, filled with unspoken promises and questions. The bond between them was growing, forged in fear, curiosity, and something deeper that neither could name yet. The night had begun, and with it, a journey into power, danger, and desire that would test everything they knew. The palace of Eldoria was alive with whispers. In the throne room, the golden chandeliers cast sharp shadows across the marble floor. Courtiers moved with careful steps, their eyes flicking toward one another, measuring loyalties and plotting secrets. Among them walked King Kale, regal and commanding, yet burdened by thoughts heavier than any crown could weigh. The events of the past nights, Ira's secret, the stirring of the moonmark, and the priestess's warning, had unsettled the very foundation of his kingdom. Ira moved quietly along the outer hallways, keeping to the shadows. Her training under Kale had begun to show results. She could move with purpose, observe without drawing attention, and control the subtle magic that pulsed through her veins. The moonmark, once a secret she feared, now hummed softly under her skin, a gentle reminder of power and responsibility. Yet the palace was no longer safe. Rumors of her secret had begun to slip through the cracks of loyal servants. Eyes that had once ignored her now lingered, calculating what advantage her child's mark could bring. She had learned to trust only Kale, and even that trust was delicate, held together by careful glances and unspoken understanding. In the private garden where frost-tipped roses bent under the morning light, Kale awaited her. His dark cloak swept over the gravel path as he approached, hands clasped behind his back. When he saw her, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "You are growing stronger," he said, his tone measured. "But strength alone will not protect you. You must be cunning as well." Ira nodded. "I understand. I want to help protect this kingdom and the child." His gaze softened briefly, though shadows still lingered in his eyes. "It is not only the kingdom you must protect, it is yourself, and it is me. You must learn to trust me completely." Her heart beat faster. Trust was a fragile thing. She had been betrayed before, and the memory of past heartbreaks lingered like a shadow. Yet with Kale, there was something different, a dangerous kind of honesty in his eyes that both terrified and drew her. Before she could respond, a sudden noise broke the quiet. Courtiers were arriving early for a council meeting, their footsteps echoing across the stone. Kale's expression darkened. "Not here," he said, taking her hand lightly. "Follow me." He led her through a hidden corridor, narrow and lined with ancient tapestries depicting battles long past. The air was cool and smelled faintly of moss and candle smoke. Ira followed silently, feeling both fear and excitement. The palace, with all its beauty and danger, had never felt so alive. When they reached a small chamber hidden behind the main hall, Kale turned to her. "They are watching always. The nobles sense weakness. If they discover the moonmark, they will move to control it or destroy it." Ira swallowed. She had known that court intrigue was dangerous, but the reality was sharper than any words could describe. She could see it now. Hidden glances, the faint tension in every movement, the way loyalty could twist into betrayal with a single whispered word. "Then we must act before they do," she said, her voice steady despite the fear rising in her chest. Kale studied her, his expression unreadable. "Yes," he said finally, "and tonight you will face your first trial. You must control your power and use it to protect yourself. Failure is not an option." The day passed slowly, filled with whispered lessons and quiet observation. Ira learned to sense the energy around her, the subtle shifts in the air, the tension in a person's step, the faint traces of magic that lingered where someone had passed. Kale guided her patiently, correcting her stance, teaching her to focus, and sometimes letting his hand brush hers briefly as he adjusted her movements. The touches, fleeting as they were, sent warmth through her, making her heart beat faster than she could admit. As dusk fell, the palace became restless. Courtiers gathered in the main hall for the evening council. Ira followed Kale to a hidden balcony overlooking the room. Below, nobles murmured to one another, their eyes sharp, suspicious. Some glanced toward the king, their expressions a mixture of fear and ambition. Others whispered to one another, unaware that the shadows carried their secrets far beyond the walls. "This is the test," Kale said, his voice low. "You must remain unseen while sensing the intentions of those below. Learn their thoughts, their fears. Use your power carefully." Ira took a deep breath, focusing on the faint hum of the moonmark within her. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the pulse of the palace, the movement of people, the faint whispers of magic that surrounded her. Slowly, she began to sense patterns: who was loyal, who sought power, who feared her secret. It was exhausting, yet exhilarating. For the first time, she felt the true scope of her gift. She was not powerless. She was a force that could influence the world around her if she learned to control it. Suddenly, a sharp movement in the council room drew her attention. One of the nobles, a man known for his ambition and cruelty, whispered to another, his eyes flicking toward the throne. Ira felt a surge of anger and fear. The man intended to use the moonmark for his gain, to manipulate the king and seize power. "Focus," Kale's voice murmured in her ear. His presence grounded her, steadying her fear. Ira exhaled slowly, channeling the moonmark's energy. She sent out a subtle wave, a pulse of influence that touched the noble's mind. It was gentle, not harmful enough to unsettle him, to make him hesitate and second-guess his plan. The man faltered, his words catching in his throat. Below, Kale observed with a faint smile. "Good," he whispered. "Control, not force. You are learning." Ira's heart raced, but there was also a thrill, a sense of power that she had never known. She realized that the moonmark was not only a danger but also a gift, a tool that could protect her, the child, and even the king. But the thrill was short-lived. A sudden shout echoed from the council room. Another noble, realizing something was amiss, accused the ambitious man of plotting against the throne. Chaos erupted. Courtiers shouted, chairs scraped across the floor, and the chamber filled with confusion. Ira's pulse quickened. The moonmark hummed in response, as if sensing the danger. She reached out instinctively, trying to calm the energies, to soothe the fear and panic that had spread through the room. Kale's hand found hers, guiding her, anchoring her. "Steady," he murmured. "Do not let them see your power. Control it from within." With his guidance, Ira focused. Slowly, the room's chaos began to fade. The noble who had shouted looked around, confused and uncertain. The ambitious man lowered his voice, unsure how to continue his plotting. The others calmed as well, unaware of the subtle magic that had settled the storm. Ira opened her eyes, breathless. She had done it. She had controlled the moonmark, influencing the world around her without revealing her secret. Kale's gaze met hers, and for a moment the tension between them was electric. His dark eyes held admiration, respect, and something deeper, a quiet intensity that made her heart ache. "You are ready," he said, his voice low and steady. "But the true test comes soon. Others will not be so easily swayed. You must be vigilant." Ira nodded, feeling both pride and fear. She had learned much today, yet she knew the road ahead would be harder. The court was a dangerous place, and her secret made her a target. She had power now, but power came with responsibility and risk. As the council ended, Kale led her away from the chaos. They walked through the palace corridors, silent except for the soft echo of their steps. Outside, the night was cool and still, the moon hanging low over the towers. "You did well," Kale said, stopping near the garden. "You are stronger than you realize." Ira looked at him, uncertainty and admiration mingling in her gaze. "I could not have done it without you," she admitted. He studied her for a long moment and she felt the weight of his gaze on her. "Perhaps," he said finally, "but you are learning to stand on your own. That is what matters." A quiet tension hung between them, charged and unspoken. Ira felt a pull toward him, an urge to reach out, to trust, to share what she could not say aloud. But the palace, the court, and the danger that shadowed them all reminded her that even now every step was measured, every gesture careful. The night stretched on, and as they parted, Kale's final words lingered in her mind. "Do not forget, power and trust are tied together. One without the other can destroy you." Ira pressed a hand to her belly, feeling the child stir. She understood now more than ever the stakes of her journey. She could not hide. She could not run. She had to embrace her strength, face the court's dangers, and navigate the storm of intrigue and desire that surrounded her. And as the wind whispered through the frost-tipped roses, she realized something she had not dared to before. The connection between her and the king was deeper than fear or duty. It was something fragile and dangerous, a bond that could save them both, or shatter everything. The night had tested her, the court had tested her, and yet she survived, stronger, wiser, and more aware than ever of the trials yet to come. Eldoria slept under the silver moon, unaware of the power awakening within one of its most hidden citizens. And somewhere in the shadows, a king and a maid carried a secret that could change the fate of the kingdom forever. The first light of dawn broke over Eldoria, painting the palace towers in soft gold and silver. The world seemed calm, yet the tension in the air was undeniable. The events of the past nights had shaken the very foundation of the kingdom. The court whispered of secrets, curses, and power beyond comprehension. And at the heart of it all stood Ira, her hands pressed against her belly, the moonmark glowing faintly beneath her gown. She had grown stronger. The lessons with King Kale had taught her control, awareness, and courage. Yet the court was unforgiving, and danger lingered in every shadow. Today she would face a test that would decide not only her fate but the future of the kingdom and the life she carried. Kale stood beside her, dark and imposing, yet his presence carried a rare warmth. He had changed as well. The fearsome king, known for his authority and coldness, now carried a new understanding. His past mistakes, his guilt, and his loneliness had softened, transformed by the bond forming between him and the maid who dared to challenge fate. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low, steady, yet laced with concern. Ira nodded, feeling the life within her stir as if the child understood the gravity of the moment. "I am," she said, her voice firm despite the fear fluttering in her chest. The palace had convened the nobles in the grand hall, a space of marble floors, high ceilings, and glittering chandeliers. The courtiers, sensing tension, whispered among themselves, their eyes flicking toward the king and the maid who had stirred so many rumors. Some eyes were filled with ambition, others with suspicion, and a few with curiosity. Kale led Ira to the center of the hall, where a circle of silver candles had been arranged. The priestess, cloaked in gray and as cold as stone, stood at the edge of the circle. Her eyes fixed on Ira, sharp and calculating, the faintest smirk tugging at her lips. "The moonmark awakens fully tonight," the priestess said, her voice echoing in the hall. "Its power will reveal truths, test hearts, and expose weaknesses. Beware, maid, the path is perilous." Ira swallowed, gripping the edges of her gown. She felt the pull of the moonmark, a hum deep in her veins, urging her to rise, to control, to protect. She glanced at Kale. His gaze was steady, unwavering, and full of trust. "Do not fear," he said quietly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We face this together." The priestess lifted her hands, chanting softly in a language older than Eldoria itself. The air shimmered, cold and electric, and the shadows of the hall seemed to dance along the walls. Ira's pulse quickened. She could feel the power swirling around her, sensing every intention, every fear, every desire in the room. "Focus," Kale whispered. "The moonmark is your ally. Use it, but do not let it consume you." Ira closed her eyes. She felt the pulse of the palace, the heartbeat of its people, and the subtle stirrings of magic in the walls themselves. The moonmark hummed brighter, resonating with her courage, her fear, and her love. Slowly she extended her awareness, sending a gentle wave of energy through the hall. It touched the nobles, calming suspicion, softening ambition, and making deceit hesitate in its tracks. The priestess frowned, sensing the shift. "Impressive," she said, though her voice lacked warmth. "But power alone is not enough. One must confront the heart of fear itself." Suddenly, the ambitious noble who had caused chaos in the council chambers appeared at the edge of the circle. His eyes blazed with anger and desire for control. "You cannot hide behind magic, girl," he shouted. "The moonmark belongs to those with strength to seize it." Ira's heart raced. Fear surged, but so did determination. She could feel the child within her respond, small and alive, as if lending courage. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, letting the moonmark's energy flow through her fully. The hall seemed to pulse with light and warmth. Shadows recoiled as her aura expanded, a gentle but unyielding force. The noble staggered back, unsure of his next move. The priestess watched, her face unreadable, yet her eyes betrayed a hint of awe. "You see," Ira said, her voice clear and strong, "this power is not for domination. It is for protection, for life, for truth." The noble faltered, his anger dissolving into confusion. The moonmark had touched him, not to harm, but to reveal the emptiness of his ambition. Slowly he bowed his head, realizing that control over others was not true strength. Kale stepped forward, standing beside Ira, his hand brushing hers. "You have done well," he said, his voice both firm and tender. "But the true challenge is yet to come." From the shadows, the priestess began another chant, more urgent and powerful. The floor trembled slightly, and the walls of the palace seemed to lean in closer. Ira felt fear and exhilaration mingle. The moonmark's energy pulsed within her, almost as if it had a life of its own, responding to the danger. "Focus," Kale urged, pressing his hand lightly against her back. "You are ready for this." Ira closed her eyes, drawing on everything she had learned, the lessons, the control, the courage, and the bond she shared with the king. She extended her awareness outward, touching every heart, every shadow, every intention in the hall. Slowly, the tremors subsided. The shadows softened. Even the priestess paused, sensing the mastery Ira now held. The hall fell silent. All eyes turned toward the maid who had risen from fear to power. Ira opened her eyes, glowing faintly with the moonmark's light. She felt alive, whole, and in control not only of the magic but of her own destiny. The priestess finally spoke, her voice softer now. "You have faced the trial well. The moonmark responds to courage, to compassion, and to love. You have proven yourself, child of destiny." Ira felt a rush of relief, but also exhaustion. The energy she had wielded was draining, yet exhilarating. She looked at Kale. His dark eyes were filled with pride, relief, and something deeper, a quiet, unspoken affection that made her chest ache. "You were magnificent," he said, stepping closer. "Not because of the moonmark, but because of you." Ira's heart fluttered. She had feared him, admired him, and now she felt something stronger. She reached out, her hand brushing his. He did not pull away. Instead, he closed the distance, his fingers intertwining with hers. The gesture was gentle, yet full of meaning, a promise, a bond, a shared understanding. "You have changed the course of this kingdom tonight," he said quietly. "Not through fear or power, but through strength, wisdom, and courage." Ira felt tears prick her eyes, though she did not let them fall. "I could not have done it without you," she whispered. "You believed in me when I could not believe in myself." Kale smiled faintly, though shadows lingered in his eyes. Belief is a dangerous thing, he said, but sometimes it is the only thing that saves us. The nobles and courtiers, once filled with suspicion and fear, now looked on in awe and respect. The ambitious man who had sought to control the moonmark approached, bowing his head in genuine humility. "I underestimated you," he admitted. "Your strength and your courage are true. The kingdom is fortunate to have you." Ira nodded, feeling a quiet pride. She had faced the court's dangers, controlled the moonmark, and shown that her strength was not only magical but moral. Yet the greatest challenge, she realized, had not been the nobles or the priestess. It had been trusting herself and trusting Kale. As the first rays of sun filled the hall, Kale led Ira to the balcony overlooking the city. The frost-tipped gardens shimmered in gold light, and the towers stood tall, bathed in dawn. She pressed her hand to her belly, feeling the child move as if sensing the peace of the moment. "The kingdom is safe," Kale said softly, his hand brushing hers. "For now." Ira looked at him, understanding the truth in his words. Danger would always exist, but so would their courage and their bond. They had faced fear, intrigue, and uncertainty and emerged stronger. "You will not hide anymore," Kale continued. "Not from the world, not from the court, not from me." Ira nodded. "I will not," she said. I trust you." He took her hand fully in his, holding it over her belly. "And I trust you," he replied. "Together we will face whatever comes next. The moonmark, the kingdom, and the life we protect, all of it belongs to us to shape." A gentle wind swept through the balcony, carrying the faint scent of frost roses and sunlight. The palace seemed alive, watching, waiting. And somewhere deep inside, Ira knew that she had transformed. From a hidden maid, frightened and secretive, she had become a force of courage and light. Kale drew closer, his forehead resting against hers, a gesture of intimacy, trust, and unspoken understanding. "You are no longer hidden," he whispered. "You are seen, powerful, and free. And so are we together." Ira smiled, her heart full, her fear replaced by hope and determination. "Together," she echoed. The city of Eldoria slept beneath the golden dawn, unaware of the quiet revolution that had taken place. Two hearts bound by courage and trust had faced the shadows and emerged stronger. The moonmark glowed faintly, a promise of power, protection, and love. And as the wind whispered through the towers, a king and a maid, once bound by fear and secrecy, stood united, ready to face the future with hearts intertwined, unafraid of the darkness and guided by the light of trust and redemption.